Hi, I'm Christine Tulley, President and Executive Writing Coach at Defend, Publish, and Lead, and welcome to episode 185, Why Use Omeka and Scalar. We are doing this episode today with one of our writing coaches, Heather Witcher, who has been doing writing coaching for us for a long time, and she will be running our workshop or upcoming workshop in July on using Omeka and Scalar. So these tools are tools that I'm only kind of tangentially familiar with, so I haven't actually tried to use them myself. With Scalar, I was part of like a larger research project, and I was able to submit a couple of things. I will put a link to the project that we built in the show notes just to see one example, and I know Heather will give me a couple of other examples. Maybe I could link up in show notes. But I'm going to turn it over to her, and she's going to answer some questions for me on why we might want to use these tools. Because I think it's one thing to offer a workshop, but it's an altogether other idea to try to figure out why the heck would I want to use these things? What can they do for me in my scholarship, in my research and teaching, and so on. So Heather, before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about your research area of interest and the types of coaching that you like to do, just because you're on with us and we want to introduce people to you as well as Omeka and Scalar.
My area of research is British literature, focusing specifically on 19th century poetry and digital humanities. I love working with clients on anything from just kind of brainstorming ideas to working through a full project, and just kind of the back and forth dialogue, helping clients to really hone in on what their ideas are and how to respond to others, readers or committee members, and just kind of making the project the best that it can be. That's really one of the things I enjoy about coaching is the dialogue with my clients. So that's always fun.
Fantastic. All right. So in a nutshell, why would somebody want to use Omeka or Scalar? I know for our clients that are going to watch this on YouTube, they'll be able to see some projects and we'll talk through them for our audio only listeners. But in a nutshell, what do these things have in common? What is different about them? They're newer tools. Not everybody has heard of them. So why would we want to use these?
So both Omeka and Scalar are platforms that are really suitable for people who are interested in multimodality, people who want to kind of integrate or enhance their text with things like video, audio, photos, and so it's really about kind of creating an immersive experience for your public, whether that is an academic public or a kind of more general public. So one of the things that is different about both platforms is that Omeka is something that definitely kind of curators or museums and archivists are very interested in using because it's a digital exhibition. So if you kind of imagine just going to like an art gallery or a museum exhibition and you're there with the artifacts and there's the plaques that are explaining it, like the captions that you have in an article, for instance, that is what Omeka provides digitally. Scalar is more of a kind of academic publishable document, right? So it's a platform, almost like a website, that enables you to do a table of contents, and just kind of read through a piece of scholarship usually, and embed video, audio, images in a way that is more cohesive, and then obviously more publicly accessible than a peer-reviewed journal publication.
Sounds great. We've been doing a lot with public scholarship. I know a lot of our workshops with Jim Lang, who's another one of our coaches, have been really focusing on writing for the public, but still using academic skills. So this is a great tie-in for that. Why don't you share with us Omeka, and let's start with that one. And what we're going to do for anybody that's audio only, I'm sure Heather can describe a little bit about what we're seeing on the screen, and we'll also have some links in the show notes that you can check them out. But Heather, if you want to just share your screen and talk us through an Omeka project so we can actually either visualize in our minds or visualize on the screen what actually would be in something like this.
So this is an example, a kind of classic Omeka example. It's from Omeka. It's not one that I've done myself. But as you can see, it looks very much like a website. It has your kind of menu up here at the top, and then the text, but it is calling itself an online exhibition. As I kind of scroll down, you can see that there are image galleries. And as you kind of click on one of these, so I'm just gonna click on it. It's got your citation right here, and then it also includes descriptors and metadata, which is helpful for, especially if you're thinking like of an artifact or an image or something like that. You want to be able to have all of the information about that artifact. So Omeka, as I said, is really good for exhibitions, but also I've used it personally for helping me in my research process. I do a lot of archival research and a lot of images. And I use like my own personal Omeka to just keep track of those manuscript images, what the artifact images that I'm taking, so that I can have a description of what it is, the title, the creator, the date, like all of the important information that you don't want to lose. Instead of having it kind of haphazard and whatever notes I have, I also use Omeka for that. So that's another way of thinking about Omeka. Because this particular exhibition is more about art, each of the pages, again, is very similar to a website page. So it's not a cohesive argument. It's individual pages that again embed the artifacts within it.
Yeah, I totally see this. And for anybody that's audio only, it's kind of like a first time look at it from my end. It really does look sort of like an online art museum for this particular example, but I could see for any of our scholars that are working on image-based work, how this would be a really great place to store your notes, because the description, I would assume, is kind of up to you. So not only could you have maybe a description that goes with an artifact, like whether it's archival or an image you took, but you can also craft that description yourself if you would want to, right? Is this
Yes.
private? So this would be a question I would have. Like, let's say one of our scholars is really interested in using this to kind of keep notes on images, or I could see all kinds of other things. Like I've done time use diary research. Like I could see having basically an entry for every time use diary and all the tags and all that. But is there a way to keep it private or password protected? So, if we're using it in kind of a working way, it wouldn't be out there.
Yes. So it is not available until you publish it, is what it's called. And then it becomes publicly available with the URL that you have allotted it. So if you wanted to keep it just for your own private use, you just don't publish. And that's the same also for Scalar.
And is there a free version of this for people that would want to test it out?
Yes, the Omeka Classic version is the free version, and that is what I definitely recommend. I've had my students use Omeka to build kind of class projects. They obviously have the paid versions, and usually the library is the person who would pay for that because it is kind of expensive. The
Yeah.
free version does what you need it to do.
All right. Yeah, thanks. All right. So let's switch over to Scalar and figure out what happens with that.
Okay, so this is one of my kind of publications with Scalar on Elizabeth Bishop. And so immediately kind of the thing that grabs your attention with Scalar is that it is very kind of visual heavy. And then when you click on kind of like the first entry, it's much more focused on like a piece of scholarship. So It has over here the kind of table of contents, which would be the individual sections of an article. And then because this particular piece was an outcome of archival research, it's filled with manuscripts that you can, again, you'll on the side here, you see the same kind of metadata that we saw in Omeka, but it's just, it's cleaner, it's much more, it looks shinier in my opinion. It's like a shiny publication. And so, yeah, it's just Scalar is definitely much more, it looks much more like a piece of scholarship. That's really the big difference, I think.
Yeah, just looking at it, because this looks different from the project that I got to help create in it. And when you're mentioning that looks shinier, I see what you mean, because many of us have seen digital publications that are just built in some kind of like a web text builder. But what this allows, that at least that I can see, is that it's got some really interesting ways of capturing image, but also the scholarly text around it. So if you were because this reads like a digital article,
Mhm.
in the way, it's really helpful too to have the table of contents where it's up in the upper left-hand corner where, you can go ahead and click on certain sections in a way that's not distracting like a toolbar on a scholarly publication website. Like, we're so used to seeing things like argument, rationale, methodology when we read these scholarly arguments that are done in hypertext, whereas this is closer, I think, to kind of what you would get maybe in a print journal, but it's more visually appealing. So I could see where this is great. Have you published a digital peer-reviewed publication using this tool?
Yes, so this is actually one of them.
Okay.
It's part of an open access book on Elizabeth Bishop, and then this is kind of like the article version of the fuller chapter. And then I've also worked with a client who has used Scalar for an article that I forget the name of the journal off the top of my head, but the entire special issue was published in Scalar. So I think
Yeah.
that there are a lot of journals now that are open to these kinds of supplemental publications.
And then I know sometimes with digital publications, one of the issues for the journal is they like to own the files. Is this downloadable?
It can be downloadable. You can't really do that in this example because it was archival material that's under permissions and copyright. But you
Right.
can, if it is in the public domain, you can make it so that the public can download high resolution files.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, this is really helpful. So, just as a reminder, then for our workshop that'll be Thursday, July 25th at noon Eastern. If you want to learn about Omeka and Scalar, we are actually running those two things together in a workshop for just $10. So really, very low cost, effective way to kind of learn about these tools. You'll be able to do that with Heather. And also, if you are not able to attend, you can certainly get the recording. We record all of our workshops, so registration will give you that recording. But also, if you're thinking about maybe wanting to use one of these projects, we do have several coaches that do digital work with a lot of tools, and Heather certainly would be an expert in both of these areas. So if you're interested in following up with us, we are happy to have you do that. And happy writing this week.